Connecticut.
Take a look at the map of Connecticut, and you'll see the place of my birth.
It's the grandest place on earth. Willimantic, Willimantic, my hometown. There's a good main street where good neighbors meet. Miles of smiles keep chasing you around. You'll be living, life's worth living. Once you're here, you'll stay. We have everything to make a man a king in Willimantic, USA.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Ken Poland, the voice of Windham on Windham Weekly. My co-host, Mark Doyle, is MIA today. Hope all's well with him. That song may bring back memories to some people, especially our guest. The one and only Joseph J. Hanfield is here to tell us his stories of his childhood memories of growing up in Willimantic and what it means to him. If you want to call Jay and say hello, you haven't seen him in a while, 860-456-1400. We're on WILI 1400 and 95.3 FM. Jay, welcome to the show.
Well, Ken, thank you very much, and I'm just sorry that Mr. Doyle couldn't make it tonight. I know he's the star of the show, at least that's what he tells me, but I'm really looking forward to talking to you tonight because we've got a lot to talk about and a lot of interesting things to talk about, and I'm pretty excited, so...
Let's make that one correction. He is not the star of the show. I am the talent.
You're the voice.
I am the voice. That's
You're
all
the
there is
voice.
to it.
You're the voice.
And we do welcome everyone to call 456-1400 because Jay has some interesting stories, and you might want to jog his memory as he's not getting any younger, but he's certainly cute. Let me tell you.
It's the haircut.
Jay, let's start with the Hanfield family, which, you know, it goes back how many generations here in Willimantic?
Well, quite a few, but I just want to just tell you one story about the Willimantic USA song. I brought up one of my posts, I don't know, about a month ago, about maybe the third Thursday, have as many people as show up, and then everybody sing Willimantic USA. Post it somewhere. I mean, we'll have national news here, state news. I think it'd be a heck of a thing to do.
And that brings up another point. Today is third Thursday. Come on
Yes, it
down and
is.
support our community, the vendors, the volunteers, the town. It looks like it should be a big one today. Hopefully the weather holds off for these folks. A lot of effort and energy go into it. Who knows? Maybe Jay will stick around and grab himself a sausage sub.
Sausage sub.
So let's go. Let's go back to your family.
All right. Goes back a long way. My
Christopher
grandparents.
Columbus?
No.
Oh, not that far back?
No. He's Italian, though. My mother's Italian.
Oh, he's
so
not
it
a
could
good
have been
man
maybe.
either. But anyway.
So Hanfield is a French-Irish name. My ancestors came from Ireland, immigrated to Canada over the years, and then, like a lot of people back in the, I guess, late 1800s to late 1900s, a lot of the French came to the Northeast, down through Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut. You probably had in some Rhode Island, all these mill towns, and that's where a lot of the French came from back in those days. But my mother,
I would assume they came for work.
Absolutely came for work. Look at all the mills. Look at American Thread was one of them, but they brought in people from Europe as well. But a lot of mills in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and that was what the economy was in New England back 100 years ago or 150 years ago. But on my mother's side, she's Italian, Lucy Santa Lucia. My grandparents came from Sicily, Italy. I believe it was back in the early 1900s. In fact, I went to Ellis Island and tracked my grandmother's boat, the boat she was on, when she went through Ellis Island. And back then, you needed a sponsor. You just couldn't come into the United States. You had to have somebody vouch for you. So I believe it was one of my aunts who lived in New London that met my grandmother at the train station, and that's how a lot of, obviously French, mostly European, I think, back then. I mean, millions came through Ellis Island, but they came through legally. And then a lot of other Italian families did as well. And I just want to talk about a lot of the Italian families that had little markets in Willimantic over the years.
I'm going to stop you.
Sure.
So Mom came in after from Italy. Dad came down from the north from Canada.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Yeah. Both my grandparents from
And how'd they
Italy.
meet, Jay?
I never found that out. It's, a lot of families back
history,
then.
even
The
inside the family.
Irish hung with the Irish. The Italians
Correct.
had their neighborhoods.
Correct.
There was a close group back in those days. They had the French Club, the American,
What you're going to do is look over at the two churches right over here, the two Catholic churches. They were
Absolutely.
built across the street from each other. I had the similar thing in Rhode Island.
Right.
There was the Irish church, and then there was the French church.
So I assume that's how they met. And then talking about the grocery stores, that's what they called little markets back in those days. You can start at Mansfield Avenue. There was the Frino's Market, Frino's Real Estate. That's where their parents owned a business. Then the Milo Market. Then there was Harry Bretschneider had Harry's Market. And then there was Remy's, which back in those days was a little Italian market. It was a little grocery store. And then there was Mazzola's going down Main Street. And that was before any Finest. I think Finest was the first national chain to come into Willimantic, which I believe was on Valley Street, where what was this? Elm's Package Store is now. And there was La Rivier's Market. There was La Branch's Market out in Hampton or Chaplin. There was Foodland, which Bob's is now. That was across the river. That's where there was one. And also Southside Market, which is on South Park Street there. So
who started the Remy's in your family? Was it your dad or your grandfather?
No. It was that before that.
It was
I think it was that turn of the century. There was an Italian family. I think it was the Mazzolas that first started. It was like a little Italian grocery store. Then my grandmother bought it, I think in the early 1940s. Then my dad, Remy, he bought it from my grandparents, I believe in the early 50s. And then he retired in 74, and then I had it for 10, 15 years. So has quite the history in Willimantic.
Now, let's go to Remy's again. I mean, so who started with the cabbage and why on the grinders?
From what I understand through lore is that back in World War II, when I believe my grandmother started making grinders, the lettuce was hard to get back in those days. Plus, it was more expensive, so they started putting shredded cabbage on it.
Yeah, I'd imagine because most of the cabbage came from the West Coast, and cabbage is huge up north in Canada.
Absolutely.
Up the East Coast. So.
Yeah, it was a very interesting place. But there were a lot of little stores like Charlie's, which is where Natchog School was, Adams Market on Valley Street. Along with grinders, my dad had a little candy section, penny candy. But it wasn't a penny, it was like 3 for a penny. It was really cheap back then. You could get 3 Fireballs for a penny, or Squirrel Nuts, and Smarties. I mean, there were so many different candies, and my dad didn't really make any money on the candy. Most of the kids, it was behind the counter, so little kids just filled up the bag and then bring it to the counter, and Dad would say, "How much you got?" 5 cents. So probably a quarter, but there was no money to be made in those days on that. So, but it was just a great time growing up in Willimantic. It's like everywhere in the United States. Everybody had a downtown, at least, in the smaller areas. I don't know what it was like. You go up in
Same thing.
In Pawtucket.
Yep.
Yeah. You had your downtown section.
Yep. It still exists today. It's just not as vibrant.
Well, neither is.
Well, they're doing a lot to rebirth it, if you will.
Well, Putnam's done a nice job.
Putnam has done a wonderful job. They remade themselves, right? Now they're like probably the antique and restaurant.
They've got a lot of restaurants too there.
They had a lot of restaurants, a lot of choices up there.
And there's a lot of influence from Massachusetts and Rhode Island because they're up in the northeast corner.
Correct.
So that helps them a lot too. But another thing that is important to remember is we grew up at at least I did. If you go up after World War II, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that was the height of downtowns in America. The little stores like Curran's Pharmacy or Todd, not Todd's, but Grant's and Woolworths. There were little stores everywhere, which was great. We could take our bikes and ride all over Willimantic. I mean, I don't think you see, well, now you see scooters and little mopeds all over the streets, which I think is very annoying, and it's not, I'm hearing a lot of complaints about that lately, so.
Yeah. So most of the buildings that you still see on here, the majority of them are still from back in the day, remodeled and, changed with the cultures that have moved into the community. And then the town has done a heck of a lot to invested itself of late. So all these little stores were there, you ran your dad's store for about 15 years.
Yeah, 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. And so did you draw from Eastern at all back then? I mean, who was your client base?
Yeah, Eastern was, I mean, we still had a lot of folks that had been going to Remy's for years. That had been a lot of college kids at one point. You know, towards the I think late 70s, early 80s. Big college influence. And that helped because Subway came in after that, and that made had a big dent on the business too. So
yeah, once the chains start coming in, it really it changes the small. Well, as you could see,
yeah,
the groceries are going. I mean, you can go to Providence still. You go on the hill, and you'll still see the cheese shop, the meat shop, the dish shop back, and that hasn't changed.
No,
and I don't think it's for nostalgia that it hasn't changed. It's still gonna, most of the Italian people in that neighborhood have kind of dispersed,
right.
But they come back, and it's a hub of restaurants as well. And I think Willimantic is still in the midst of trying to find itself between trying to, the entertainment district and so on. But there's still a lot of small shops that are just hanging in and, hoping for that brighter future. And I think with the growth of Eastern, I think that's coming. The kids are going to, that town and gown has to mesh a little bit more.
Right, but I just got a pamphlet for the Windham's or Willimantic's 100th anniversary. I noticed Willimantic tried to establish an art community here. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, on that 300th anniversary, you're talking about?
Right, yeah, 150th anniversary.
150th.
Yeah, and we had a Windham Willimantic Art Council, and it was pretty active back in those days. But for whatever reason, it just kind of went by the wayside. And as you said, now we're trying to find an identity. And it's very hard to do that based on what's going on in town.
I think that slowly it's happening. There is a music scene, there's an art scene, so definitely entertainment. We're developing some restaurants that are, they're coming and going. So hopefully we can see that pick up. But
going back to Willimantic back in those days.
Yeah, that's what we want to do, yeah.
We saw the best of life, actually. There were really no wars. There was really not much going on. We saw the beginning of TV. I remember seeing my first TV in the late 50s, as most of us did back in those days. Black and white. You had the antenna up on the roof. You had to sit there in the chair and turn the dial to get one of the 3 stations. It was kind of cool, but now you sit there with your 5 controllers with the 750 stations. I mean, we've seen it all. We see, like, just in technology, medical technology. People are living longer. You can get heart transplant, bypass operations, new kidneys, new lungs, new knees, new shoulders, new hips. It's just a marvel of mankind. So we've seen the best pretty much through everything. Except the food. The food is not so good. All the advent of all the McDonald's and the fast food places, that has made America a little more chubbier, I'd like to say, and it's not a good thing. That's what RFK is trying to get through to people, is we have to eat better. We have to stay healthy. So, but it was good. It was fun. You talk to anybody. People love. I've been posting my mom's postcards.
That's what I was going to ask you, Jay. So, what is your sudden motivation? Because I know Mr. Chuck Straub, who worked at the Chronicle.
Does a great job.
He posts a lot of the historical stuff of our area and the times, and I love seeing the advertisements of how much product cost back then.
Yeah.
What is your personal motivation for that? I know you're getting a kick out of it because you'll call me and you're saying you're getting 1,000 hits. And
no, well, it's a couple of 100, 200, depending on what it is. But my mom was always interested in postcards. I remember as a kid, she'd go to shows. I think his name was Armin Gamache, and Mr. Gamache, who loved postcards as well. So they'd swap postcards. And then she passed away, and the postcard album went to my sister, and it was put away in a closet. And I asked her one day, maybe about a month, you still got those cards? She says, yeah. So I pulled them out, and I started posting them. And people love postcards. They love looking at older pictures of Willimantic. I posted most of the schools back in the early 1900s, churches, and people are fascinated. I just want people to see them and think about what schools they went to, what memories they have. If you give people a chance, they love to talk about growing up in their town. So
Yeah, well, it's important to have some historical basis to look back on and to see, to appreciate what you had and what we can have, and motivate the community that way.
we were fortunate.
Ladies and gentlemen, unbelievable.
The fun can begin because I'm here, boys.
Mark Doyle has arrived, and who said
So the fun can
the
begin.
mushroom was dead? I didn't
I
say
tell you.
that. He's back with his old buddy, the old work pals,
Little Mr. Hanfield.
with J.J. Hanfield.
JJ the
456-1400. Just call him to say hi to him.
Yeah.
Make the old guy
Make
feel
him feel good.
Yeah.
Hey, old guy.
J. Remy Hanfield.
J. Remy
J.
Hanfield.
Remy Hanfield.
Sorry.
That was my nickname in high school, Rem.
Was it?
Yes. I had a few over the years, but
You had,
Rem
you
stuck.
had names, yeah?
I had a lot of
Yeah.
names.
What
A few
year
other.
did you graduate from from
1969.
1969.
Wow. Speaking of
50 some odd
school,
years
JJ,
ago.
tell us about your early days at St. Joe's. Because as I recall, you went to the original St. Joe's, that building that's in between St. Mary's St. Joe's and the church. Is that one you went to?
Well, it's still standing right at the corner
Right.
of Valley.
That's the
and,
original one. Is that the
Yeah.
one you went to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah, there's no other Catholic church at, well, St.
So
Mary's.
when did
but
they build St. Mary's St. Joseph School?
had to be in the late 1800s. This was a long.
No, I mean
really.
the second one, the one they were just currently using. Why, unbelievable! It's the mayor.
I'm here to tell you,
Oh my God, my
The
day is
mayor showed
complete.
you
Wait a minute,
Republicans and what are you,
Like,
Republicans?
smile for the camera. This is the
Wow.
voice of Windham, the chief of staff for the mayor, Tom DeVivo. I don't know if you know that, everybody, but
You
I'm
are
in-
the chief of my chief of
I'm his
staff.
consigliere. You know what I
Right.
mean?
The
Hey,
mayor.
Welcome.
Hey, is
I
he
have to-
charging at me? I want to take him down, put him on his chest.
Well, go
and
ahead.
handcuff him.
Go ahead.
Cuff him. Cuff him, Dano. Cuff him.
Why?
Why?
You're
He's
interrupting a
charging
press
you.
What have
conference.
I done? Listen,
He's a charger.
No,
That's
he's
right.
fine. He's
you
up.
guys are Republicans in recovery.
He's like
Is that the
Padillo
name
there,
of this
that
show?
senator guy there.
Right.
Padillo.
Is that the name of your show,
Yeah,
Republicans
it's
in
the-
Recovery?
It's a 16-step show.
Since you're here, though, I just want to stop and invite all your listeners, both of them, to show up and come tomorrow to the clock striking at 11, between 11 and 12. We're going to start the clock at 11:45 at Town Hall. This is a big clock. I'm going to drive my DeLorean there. I'm going to dress up like the guy from Back to the Future.
Wow.
Wow.
I
Wow.
have the white jacket and everything else.
So he said between 11 and 12, maybe 11:45, they're going to do the clock.
Well,
'Cause the
11:45.
clock runs a little fast on the East Coast. You know what I mean? We're fast. This ain't the
little
West Coast where it's
fast.
laid back.
Listen,
So we
Jay
have-
told me it's been right twice a day.
We have
So why
chimes?
bother fixing it?
Do we have chimes now?
Yes,
Mayor?
it will have chimes.
Wow.
How much,
So
how much that costs a town?
Oh,
It was paid for with state money that we picked up from Greenwich. So,
Okay.
the Fairfield County.
Don't you want to know what time it is, Jay?
I don't need to
that'll bring
clock.
back to memory. Weren't you when you were a kid? You didn't have a watch,
Well-
probably. You walked down Main Street.
Right,
you had
you
to
were-
Actually,
look up
Jay,
the
you
still
were an
don't
old
have a
Main
watch.
Street
You were too-
person.
you were too
When
poor
did
for
the
a
bell
watch back
stop
then.
working?
I have no idea.
'Cause
Had
they
to be
don't-
40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah,
don't
I
remember
called
it
Joe
working.
Gardner home. But anyhow, this is a great opportunity for the community to come out and see a good event start again. It's almost 100 years. It's well over 100 years old. James Hayden, we named Hayden Street after him. His son was Whiting Hayden. We named a Whiting Street after him. He lived next to Giles Field.
Okay.
And
And we
but
didn't
he-
name Merrill Field after
He
him.
paid, and his great granddaughter is starting it. I
That's
don't know how
nice.
many great-
Wow, nice.
So they're coming tomorrow. Come tomorrow at Town Hall at 11:45. We actually get it started, and then we're going to go outside because there's no air conditioning because we haven't had the funding to do the air conditioning, Jay. And I'm wondering if you could help us out a little bit.
Bond it.
No, we're not-
Bond-
Yes.
This is not a
bonds
political
alone,
show.
you
We're
have
not
to pay
talking
it back.
bonding here.
You have to put it back, but you have to
We're
pay
not
it
talking
back.
I
bonding.
was hoping not to talk politics. Bringing him in
But
here.
Band-Aids.
We didn't bring him in.
Well, I want to thank all of you. So I'd
Thanks
like
for
to have
showing up.
all of you come down tomorrow.
Right.
We'll have coffee and donuts there.
Leave you 250 for the ad. We Tom.
No.
$2.50.
Anytime.
It's a cheap ad on
the
our
mayor is always welcome here because.
$2.50.
I thank you for my
We-
consigliere.
we-
That's
sell-
right. Now you tell him, Tommy boy.
We sell ads cheaply here.
Thanks for
Hey,
stopping
but,
by.
come
Love
on
you,
down
brother.
tomorrow, Jay. Thanks.
No,
for
you can be a
paying
third
for my-
Thursday, John.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the mayor, our buddy, Tommy D. And if you need to call him, you got to go through me. That's what I was told.
You know, it's a big show when the mayor shows up for our show.
Well,
Ken.
let's
You know
let's
that?
get. He knows this is the #1 rated show. 456-1400. Let's get some calls in for Jay Hanfield. Mark, get back to your question.
Let's go back to the St. Joe's, St. Mary. So St. Joseph's is the building that's still there in the parking lot.
There was an early one. Both.
And then they built
St. Mary's and St. Joe's. There were two. I have postcards of those, and I think
two different schools.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
two
when did
early
they build,
schools.
When did they build that newish? And it had to be 40, 50 years ago when they built that newish one that's next to the St. Mary's Church. That's now St. Mary St. Joe's School.
No, there's two. One is St. Mary's School, and next to the brick building is St. Joe's.
Yeah, but St. Joe's hasn't used that school for years.
No.
The St. Joe's kids went to the newer school, which was
I didn't
called
know
St.
that.
Mary
No.
St. Joe's.
I graduated there in '65, and I think my brother did. So I think they closed it in the '70s.
The old school.
The old school,
Okay.
yeah.
So I know when I first came to town as the Y person, the high school was using that building for an alternate
El
high school
Faro
education.
or something, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, well, not to get involved in the political spectrum, but I think we should have, what is it called? Where the money follows the child. So everybody pays taxes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know what the term is. They should allow parents have the child be able to go wherever they want. But that would help the pro schools as well as other schools as well. So, but obviously that's going to happen. But let's get back to Willamette, USA.
Let's stay with. I would have been here on time, but I got hung up by all the trolleys on Main Street. Do you go that far back, Jay?
No,
No.
okay, postcards, but
You have postcards of the trolleys?
Yeah.
Do you know when they tore up the tracks? Because weren't the tracks still there?
the tracks have been torn out. I don't remember them in the '60s. It had to be in the '40s and '50s.
Okay.
But it was kind of like interesting looking at the picture. Willamette was a big rail hub back in the days. You know, people been posting postcards.
Is that why we have a railroad museum in town?
Yeah,
And I bet you we produce thread. We got that thread museum too.
the Thread
We
Museum.
did thread,
Absolutely.
Matter of fact, there are bobbins from the American Thread at the Smithsonian. When I went to visit the Smithsonian, I saw them there. Speaking of trains, do you recall, what was it, 20 years ago when you and I hung out at 1 o'clock in the morning for the Canadian train?
Oh yes,
That came through downtown?
That's right, downtown. Yeah,
They restarted that for about a year, and then they stopped it again.
that went by the wayside.
It was a big thing. There was like 500 or 1,000 of us hanging out by Dunkin' Donuts waiting for the Canadian train to come through.
Yeah, but like going back to it, Willamette was a big rail hub. You know, people would get on the train and they'd go down to New London or out to Hartford, and that was when the Hotel Hooker and I believe there were a couple other hotels in town that people would stay at. Willamette was a thriving place back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, we need to get it back there. But so you went to St. Joe's School. Was that K through 12? Or
K through 12. Yeah.
No, you
No,
didn't.
it was
You graduated
kindergarten.
high school, didn't you?
No, K through 8.
K through 8,
Yeah.
And then you went over to the high school. How was the high school? Where were you at the Kramer building? I would imagine.
Yeah. That was. I think according to records, that building was built. The one that exists now, was built in early 1900s. I guess the original one, or next to it, was burned by fire, and that's what happened. A lot of the buildings in schools were built with wood, and I guess the state decided, or the town decided, no more wood. That's why you see a lot of brick buildings all over the
So you
state.
went to the Kramer School for
Yeah.
high school? You didn't go to
Yeah.
the high school?
No, that opened. They were
Really?
building it in my senior year.
Oh, okay. I thought you went there. Okay.
No. I think my brother Greg was the first year. My wife Linda was the last year.
That's where the romance started. The very fortunate Mrs. Hanfield.
Lovely and most fortunate.
Is that where you first met her at the high school?
Yeah, absolutely.
And true love.
Love at first sight.
It was.
Your only love. But back then I believe we had 1,200 kids. We had graduating classes of 200 and 200 to 300
She had that many
kids.
choices, and she still picked you, Jay.
Oh, I picked her.
She was short-sighted.
Short indeed. But then, I don't know, how many kids are in the school now? 500, 600 in Windham High?
There's at least 600 kids total.
600. Yeah, I think it's a little more than that.
But I marvel, back when we were in high school, if you played sports, there were only 3 sports that you could do at the high school. At the time, you could do basketball.
Soccer.
No, soccer didn't start. I was on the first soccer team in 1967. In baseball, you had to go down to Rec Park.
Right.
If you played football, you had to go from
Got the field.
high school. You had to get all your pads on, run down High Street to Main, go at Remy's, go down Bridge Street over to Field. It was like a quarter mile.
It was a
But people
warm-up.
did-
It was like a
It was a
warm-up.
warm-up.
Well,
and then after a hard workout, you'd have to run all the way back.
That's how
and
it
then
was.
Up High Street.
That's how it was when I was growing up. None of the schools that I went to had grass around them.
No.
So I went to classical high school in Lynn, Mass, and the same thing. If you wanted to play football, you had to go from the high school to Fraser Field, which was over a mile away.
Yep.
With track, you had to run the same place. You had to go to the Fraser Field to track. There was no playgrounds or no fields anywhere near the high school. Matter of fact, that was why I used to throw shot when I did track.
Did you really?
Yeah, because we would always tell the coach that we were going to work out with the weights first, coach. So while all the track guys ran to the high school, ran to the field, we stayed back, and then we got in all the senior cars and drove to the school because we were the field guys. We didn't have to
The
do
key
track.
line there was Mark used to throw shot. Now he is shot.
Yeah, he used to throw shot.
Okay, that was a good one.
That was a good one. The voice of windows doesn't screw around when he gets going.
I couldn't get to your weight level, Ken, but I was able to throw up to 25-pounder around.
But it's interesting. You know, it was fun growing up in those days. You played baseball. You had to walk all the way down or take your bike down to Recreation Park, which is about a mile. But it was kind of interesting when you had kids that came in from West Hartford or Willing or Wethersfield. They were amazed because they had to come in, I guess it was Route 6. And back then, there was nothing on Route 6. There might have been a gas station. So they'd always say, well, how do you guys live out here? It's like farm. You guys all farmers?
It's a great farmland, yeah.
And so we got the nickname the Farmers. So we had farmer power. So anytime the kids from all the big schools would come in, we'd yell farmer power as one of our chants. It was kind of a cool thing to do. Because it was really not much out here in Windham Willimantic.
Besides some of the Mazzola, what are the other old Italian family names you remember growing up?
Well, Tambernini's, which you're well aware of.
Tampanini.
The Tambernini's.
Oh, yeah. They had a little cottage package store, a little restaurant.
Yeah.
They had...
They had Tonello, Mickey Tonello, who was mayor.
Yeah.
Mazzola, Tonello, there was the Santa Lucia's. Put me on the spotlight, Ken.
I'm not putting you on the spot. These are all your paisans. I mean...
I remember a lot of the Irish, too.
What are the O'Malleys doing these days?
And the Meehans and the O'Malleys and the O'Reillys. And what a great time it was.
How many Masons were there back then, Jay? I recall when I first came here.
Well, the towns were great Masons.
Mickey Tyrone was he was the one who put that brick facade up in front of the YMCA. So I know he was.
That's pretty ugly back then.
Yeah, that was not a pretty sight, that build.
Well, speaking of the Y, a lot of us kids went to the YMCA during the wintertime.
Yep.
Because at St. Joe's we had no facilities. We didn't have a cafeteria. We didn't have a gym. So a lot of us and a lot of kids, went to the YMCA. And I think Mr. Allen and Frank Cutco was the director of the Y.
Yep. Frank, I think, was the original physical director. I think Mr. Cutco was.
Yeah, Frank was.
Yep.
And then Mr. Allen, I remember him. But that was a great place. What a great program they offered back in those days.
Yeah,
well, there was no competition. Now we got this high-end rec center over here where the kids can really enjoy themselves.
Yeah, when I first came, the Y was the place where the Windham kids and the Willimantic kids actually mixed. That's because they came together for the Little Pal basketball, Little Pal soccer. It was the one, which was a great feeder program for the high school. When we had the high school basketball, all came out of that Little Pal basketball tradition.
Well, a lot of kids learned how to swim at the Y too.
Yep.
I mean, I learned how to play chess there. I remember watching, Muhammad Ali fight back in his early days, back in the 60s. But it was a great place for kids to hang out, get off the streets, and just have fun.
So now, did you go to the Y before it was combined? Because originally there was a movie theater next to the YMCA.
Yeah, the Gem Theater.
Gem Theater.
I think they used it. It was already closed by then. But I think the YMCA...
Yeah, they broke through the walls.
And used part of that,
That's why they came up with that pigeon coop front to unify the two fronts of the building.
Right.
Because
that's right, they did.
The movie theater was set back from the Y because of the marquee, so they had to bring them together. Yeah, it was that, as I recall, there was that, or they had the opportunity to buy property behind what is now Stop and Shop, and they opted to stay on Main Street.
A better place for it, at least I think. And when did it close? I don't remember whether it was open, because you were there what year?
I was there. Well, I was there for 5 years, and then I came to work with you of directors, and they never quite got their feet back. And then for some reason, lost in my memory, they bought or started using the facility out in North Windham.
North Windham.
Yeah, next to the gates There was a gym out there.
Oh, that's right too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so the Y kind of shifted over there, and they abandoned the building and shifted there, and it kind of lost a lot of its traditions at that point.
There was a lot going on back in those days. It was a great place for kids to grow up. We had a lot of fun. You could go wherever you want. There were no drugs. There was very little crime that I knew of, and
So tell us about the great migration to the mall. How was the town like when they decided to create what we now call the Shabu stage, but was back when I came the major parcel? That used to be actual streets and houses, didn't it?
There was back from St. Joe's. There was stores. There were buildings there along Jackson Street. There were bakeries and bars and a number of different small businesses. And then redevelopment came in all across America, which you guys might remember, where the government paid towns and cities to tear down all the areas they didn't really need or want and build whatever they wanted to. But unfortunately, nothing was ever built. They tore them all down, and then it went up with the major parcel. I think we had a couple of proposals over the years to come in and build office buildings, but most of the people that were there just they weren't marketable. There was nothing.
So after that, they just turn around and they, because a lot of stores that filled that mall in the beginning all came from Main Street.
Pretty much most of them. I believe it was in the late 60s, early 70s, the mall was built. And a lot of businesses went out to the malls, and that's when the malls were becoming popular. Downtowns were fading, malls were getting popular, and now the malls are dying, and everything's being bought online. So that's how people's buying habits change. But I remember Two Bodies moved to the mall.
The shoe store? There was a
Jinger's shoe store was here forever, and I think Mr. Jinger's just died, Ronnie. But it's not only that, it was a lot of mom and pop stores.
It was a jewelry store.
It was a jewelry store.
There's a couple of jewelry stores on Main Street.
And then
Smith Key,
Nassif at one point did go, not at the very beginning of the mall, but Nassif
Yeah.
opened up a second
Right.
unit there.
Yeah, well, that was actually on this side of Main Street originally.
They were over
And then it
here, and
moved
then they
across
went
the street.
across the street to where they were.
Where Woolworths?
Yeah, where Woolworths
Yep.
went. But
Yep.
big transformation. People's buying habits changed, and
And of course, my favorite store was the Surplus Center with Sam Gordon.
that was a great place. We used to go in there.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but we'd go in there.
Yep.
People forgot about that. In fact, I was telling Kenny about Williaminick's 150th anniversary celebration, and somebody gave me the pamphlet. It was kind of interesting. All the businesses that were there back then. Somebody you might remember is Armand Martineau.
Yes.
Yep.
He was the
barber, right?
He was a hairstylist.
I'm sorry.
He was a
I
hairstylist.
thought it was a barber.
Yeah. Well, him and his
He was across
brother.
he was across the river.
Yeah, him and his brother James. Armand and James Barbershop, but he was the chairman of the committee at that point, which is kind of interesting. And talking about the old politicians, Charlie Tarpinian, Al Vertife. I remember Al Vertife when he was going to college, because right next to Remy's was a place called the Roy Auto Parts. It was this two-story building, and then in the hurricane of '38, it tore the top half of the building off. And then it became Roy Auto Parts. When he was going to college, he worked there part-time, put himself through college. And a lot of the guys who come in Remy's, so I've known Al for ever. He was in college, I was in probably grammar school. But
Now that's Matt Vertife's father we're talking about.
Matt Vertife's
Yeah.
father, Al.
Yeah.
He was a big Democrat back in the
Yeah,
day.
and then he moved out to Lebanon.
Yep. And then it was Arnie Bocash, Republicans, Henry
Virginia Darrow.
Kacharsky, Virginia Darrow was around for a while. Lorraine is still around. Marilyn Mason, Ethel Standish. Well, Johnny Lesko, of course.
Related to Miles Standish.
Yeah.
Miles. He goes back a long way.
And he had Dan Line,
Yeah, Danny Line was around for a while.
significant teacher at the high school and promoter of the arts and the stage.
Yeah.
Heck of a golfer.
Dan was a good golfer.
Yeah.
Played with him a few times.
And
but-
speaking of chief of staff, who was Danny Lyons' chief of staff, Ken?
Oh, Nina Ricotta.
There you go.
Nina,
Nina, I
see,
forgot about
see?
Nina.
Yeah.
I knew as a fellow chief of staff member, you'd know that.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Those were days, they were fun. People were civil
Oh, yeah, I
to each
remember when
other.
Nina
And
whacked Dan over the head with her pocketbook.
What about the infamous Shell Chateau? I missed that. That seems to be. Why did that fade away? Because everyone seemed to have
Well, it
loved the
burned
Shell
down.
Chateau.
It
But
burned.
They couldn't rebuild it? Or?
No. I posted one of my mom's postcards from the Shell Chateau, And I think that was back in the early 60s and 50s. And I guess it was a big fire, and according to one of the articles in the Chronicle, instead of Shell, the S burned out, so it was Hell Chateau, which is pretty cool. A couple of firemen got hurt. I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's
It's a fun fact.
It was a fun fact. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But it's a great place. You know, there was a bar there, and there's a restaurant.
How many family members had their weddings at that hotel?
Hotel Hooker?
Yeah, I know a few.
Do you really?
Yeah, back in
Well,
the
actually, the
day.
big hotel was the one next to it. What's the building next to
Oh,
it?
yeah,
Hotel
there's
Hooker?
another one.
That had a big ballroom, and it was a
Yeah, but
major.
these people said the Hooker Hotel is where they.
Hooker Hotel was it originally started as it was a place where you came when you got off the train.
Yeah, the only picture I have is the Hotel Hooker, which was in its heyday. And I remember the state having a building
There
there.
was I can't remember the name of it now, but the building next to the Hotel Hooker was a hotel. Again, when I first came to town, the state had taken it over and was using it as dorms and
Nathan
for
Hill?
maintenance. Nathan Hill.
Hello.
I think
The
it was
Hale Hotel.
The Hale Hotel.
See, he remembered.
I understand it was.
Oh, he had a couple extra hours of snooze this
Well, I
afternoon.
understand
Yeah,
it was a major social center for town because of the bar and the piano in the bar and.
Were you around when the town hall was actually a jail and a courthouse? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was back in, I don't know, when they built the new fire police complex. Had to be in the 70s, 80s maybe?
You didn't
Yeah.
you didn't visit the jail professionally, right? You just,
No.
okay.
You were a good boy, huh?
Back in those days, we never got in trouble.
He was an altar boy. He went to parochial school.
Dominus vobiscum et cum spiritu tuo.
He still
Glory
did
be
the
to-
Latin mass, right?
Want me to sing it in Latin? I remember. I remember.
You know, his mother thought he was going to be a priest, and he ended up selling cars, kicking tires.
Kicking tires. And being a community-involved person, too.
You're very much so. I don't,
50 years worth.
Jay's been 50 years of public service.
Public service.
That's what I call it. Public service to the community.
And you guys as well. You guys have also spent many years.
Yeah, you can tell by the looks in our eyes.
Yes.
But Jay has been around 50 years involved in all of this, and because he really cares.
Now, your postcards are they on? Can we go back to Facebook and see your old postcards? Or
Well, I was telling Kenny before you got here.
well, that was
That,
before the show was really rolling. So you
Oh, no.
maybe
We,
repeat
we
it.
had a great time then. Were you here when the mayor was here?
Great memory there, Jay.
Yeah, so
I'm glad we
anyway.
brought you back for the old time show.
I wasn't sure if you remembered that. So anyway,
I was listening to you on
I
the
had
radio
the
on the way down.
my mother
So-
passed away, and my sister had
Yep, had the
the
cards. Yep.
postcards at the house, and I asked her one day about 2 months ago, "Hey, where'd the postcards go?" She said, "I got them."
So
I
what I'm
said, "Can I have them?" She said, "Sure." So I started going through them, and there's some really great stuff in there. I've only posted maybe a third of them.
So that's what I'm saying. Do they still exist on Facebook? And can I go back now
Yeah,
and
go to Willimantic
under your
Today.
name or Willimantic Today? Okay.
Yeah, they list them all the ones I've posted so far, and I probably have, I don't know, 50, 60 more, but I'm taking a break. There's a lot of activity here in town.
You may
lately
want
with the
to
budgets.
get yourself a special show at the Gilson House.
I was thinking about it because people ask me, "What are you going to do with them?" And I said,
Yeah.
"I really don't know what to do with them. Donate them."
Yeah,
That's
Gilson.
not a bad idea.
Go
I
to
got a
Gilson
bunch of
House.
Willimantic souvenirs
You
as
mentioned
well.
that. You've got some stuff too.
I got a whole room dedicated to it.
Well, as
Yeah.
I say, Jay, you can set up a whole exhibit. They do special shows now at the Gilson.
Oh, they do.
Call our old buddy Ernie Eldridge.
Ernie Eldridge, Mayor Ernie.
The mayor.
I was never his chief of staff like I am with
I'm
Tommy
sure.
D's, but
I'm sure they'd appreciate that collection.
But there's one of my favorite ones
they
is
could,
of
they,
the
could do, they could do a whole room that's dedicated to Jay Hanfield.
great Lucy Hanfield.
Lucy Hanfield.
Lucy.
We're going to dedicate to Lucy. Hanfield.
This is mom. Just to honor my mom's name.
Lucy Santa Lucia Hanfield.
Lucy Santa
Let's not
Lucia.
lose
Speaking
that-
of
that
honoring your
special
mom,
sauce.
I have to point out that Lucy Santa Lucia Hanfield has a name scholarship with Dollars for Scholars.
Yeah, she does.
in
My
her
sister
honor.
Emma
Yep.
put that in her name.
We give that out every year.
Yep.
Yep.
She's been doing that, I think, for 5 years.
Yep.
That's a great thing.
Yep.
But I was also thinking donating to town. They have as you walk into the town hall, there's a glass, enclosed glass to maybe put some pictures in there, make some. But one of my favorites is the Willimantic Diner. I don't know if you saw that one.
I did.
Yeah,
that just
wasn't
came
that
up
a
on
great
Facebook.
picture?
Someone
Huh?
was asking about Spurlock.
Jimmy Spurlock.
And
posted that
I
last
mentioned
week.
on Facebook that I thought I recall him being the mailman in that. I don't
Yeah.
know whatever happened to that mural because that was a great mural.
That was a great. Yeah, what was it on the side of Willard's or?
Well, it was for a long time. You're right. It was up at Town Hall.
And there's one down at that breakfast place.
So I'm not sure where that mural went because it was when you first walked in. It was that
In the town
wall.
hall, you're
yeah,
right.
in Town Hall.
It's no longer there. I never paid attention
Hopefully,
to
it's
it.
in storage somewhere. Hopefully, it's still available because that's another.
That's
good,
right. Mr. Spurlock was in there.
Yep, Spurlock and
There were a number of people. I
the
can't
man who used to
remember.
own the office store here. I forgot his name now. Unfortunately,
We forget sometimes.
yeah, it was opposite Nassif's. It was the office supply store.
Sumner and Sumner. Oh no,
No,
Sam
no.
Gordon. Sam Gordon.
Sam
no.
ordered. No, this was his office supply. Sam was.
Oh, office supplies
Sam was a surplus center.
and Benny's.
Pennies. Everybody
They had
loves
the worst
pennies.
paint in the world. It was like water with little food coloring in it. It was terrible, but it was cheap.
Now, was that used
It
to
was
be?
cheap.
Did that used to be an auto?
That's a Rhode Island.
That's a Rhode Island company.
That's a Rhode Island
Absolutely.
Did that used to be an auto store? Because I recall
Used to be
someone
a
was talking
store.
about that the second floor of that was reinforced because they used to put cars up there.
Yeah, it was an auto
put tires
dealership
on
before
in
my
the cars
time.
At Benny's back in the day.
Well,
Yeah.
before it was Benny's, it was a auto.
I think it was a Rambler or
Yeah, it was
I
an
forget.
actual dealership.
It was a dealership,
and they actually had cars on the second floor.
and so did Wild Motors. Wild Motors originally started on Main Street.
Right.
I think where Cumberland Farms was, or in that area.
Okay. And it was a Buick store down where the hairdresser is now, across from the public safety.
Well, it was Arthur Roy's. That's
Arthur
where
Roy's.
the public police and fire complex are now. It used to be Ray Auto Parts, and then they moved over. It was called Bunnell's Buick. Was it Miner? Roger Miner had a
Yep.
Jeep. No, they didn't have Jeep. I don't think. At
Was
the
it
beginning.
GMC?
No, they were Dodge. What was the other brand? Chrysler. In fact, my dad, when my GTO got taken out, he bought me a Gremlin. You guys can never say you had a
AMC
Gremlin.
Gremlin. I had an AMC Hornet Sportabout
Almost as
wagon.
whoa, you Mr. Big Shot.
Did you have,
1972.
and did you have Firestone
Spray
tires on that
painted
car?
I don't remember what a ugly little car that was, but it was free.
Oh, what Mrs. Hanfield must have loved it.
No. Well, I think we had that when we got married.
Yeah. Oh, I could see Linda driving around.
Oh, I got to tell you about a story about my father.
Quickly.
My father was the first beatnik or hippie in Willimantic.
Really?
I remember
Is that how it
he
started?
came home one day. I remember driving up the driveway in a emerald green with a fancy white top
Ooh, the white top.
Volkswagen bus.
Wow.
And I think after that, obviously became a symbol of the hippie days in the
Your
70s.
father was the leader.
My father was the first beatnik in Willimantic, J. Remy Hanfield.
Well, Jay, it's been a blast going through memory lane with you.
It was fun.
This is Jay Remy Hanfield, ladies and gentlemen, 50-year public servant, taking you down memory lane. We will be back next
And
Thursday.
you can still get his sandwiches at IGA, right?
Well, they're not the same. They're good. Bob does a great job there, I must admit. I gave him the idea, which
we'll
he
be
deserves.
back next Thursday on Windham Weekly. Not sure if I'm going to be here, but Mark Doyle will be here for sure. Maybe not on time, but he'll be here. Or we will play a rerun. We will find out. So we appreciate you listening. Don't forget, it is Thursday. And on behalf of the mayor, welcome to the clock opening again here in Town Hall at 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock.
11:45. They'll start the clock.
Right. Tick tock.